Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is Mr. USA 2021. He is also an IFBB Pro bodybuilder. Today's guest is Jordan Hutchinson. Jordan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Quentin, thanks for having me on, man.
For sure, dude. So we're just going to jump right into things. I like to start Behind the Muscle podcast off by asking all of my guests, Jordan, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders or fitness athletes of all time?
So hands down for me, ever since I started, has been Dorian Yates. Among those would be Jay Cutler and Kevin Levrone. I like the early 2000s and 90s guys, mostly the 90s bodybuilders, but Dorian Yates is the one, hands down, has always been my favorite. I love his work ethic. I love that he wasn't the most genetically blessed, because I don't feel that I'm the most genetically blessed bodybuilder, but I've had to work my tail off to get where I'm at. And I've always been motivated by him and his training. I see similarities in him and with me in my mindset, which maybe that's somewhat of how I shaped my mindset from how he was. But hands down is Dorian. And then Jay Cutler, of course. I love the freaks of the sport, but at the same time, the guys that always came in condition and still had shape too. I mean, Dorian had incredible shape as well, always came in sharp, but I respect those guys. And then Kevin Levrone was also one of my favorite physiques.
Awesome, dude. All right. Kind of the second question, just to jumpstart the conversation here, Jordan. What age did you start lifting weights, and kind of what was the impetus or the why behind you starting strength training?
Yeah, so I started when I was 17. Prior to that, I absolutely hated the gym. I hated weight training in general. I played basketball from an early age, and I had done agility and speed training, vertical jump training. I had a crazy vertical jump in high school. I was a real skinny guy, but I played 1 year of football when I was 16. And I played a little bit of free safety and cornerback and even a little bit of running back. But I realized, I had strong legs, but I was just so small. I mean, even among the guys on the basketball team, I was like, they called me Little Jordan. So I'd always been kind of discouraged by how skinny I was. I would walk around with these size small Hollister, Abercrombie shirts. I was just a little guy. And I'd always thought I just didn't have any shot at having muscle on my frame, though I hadn't really applied myself. So after that season of football, a bunch of the football guys invited me to go train with them at the Y, and I always played basketball at the YMCA. And I was like, I really don't want to do that. Like, I hate weight training. I do not want to do that. But I guess to hang out with the guys, I'll go, whatever, I'll go. So they kept talking me into it. And I was like, okay, this isn't so bad when I have all these guys working out with me. But then, it wasn't long after that. And I already ate a truckload of food. I've always been able to house a lot of food. So it wasn't long after that, all of a sudden I start seeing my body respond really well. And I have people start saying, oh my gosh, you're adding some muscle. What happened to you? And, I'm having to size up my clothes constantly. Nothing fits anymore, and I'm loving it. And I really just put on a lot of size right off the bat, just mostly eating junk, to be honest. I would bring PB&Js and sandwiches with me to work, but then pre-workout and post-workout, I'd have some crazy massive sub or something, or McDonald's or whatever I could get my hands on. And so I just started out falling in love with packing muscle on my frame and training. And I just ended up loving training. I loved to bench, loved to squat, loved to deadlift right off the bat. And that really built a super strong base for me. So kind of started off the bat with that. And then I was 19 when I did my first show. And it wasn't an NPC show. It was one of these, it's INBF or ANBF or something like that. I don't even remember. And somebody at the YMCA just talked me into it. A few of the trainers and stuff talked me into it. just because I had gained so much size and I never even thought about it. I was like, I'm not going to step up there in those trunks. That's just weird. So I was like, whatever, I love competing. I always wanted to compete in something. I was no longer doing high school sports. So I decided to take a stab at it and prep myself for that show. Had no clue what I was doing, but it wasn't embarrassing how I showed up to that show compared to everybody else. I did pretty well considering, and I just caught the bug after that. I was like, okay, this is what I was meant to do, even though I'd only grazed the surface. So
love it, man. And we're gonna dive deeper into kind of the contest history and competitions.
yeah,
But
yeah,
before we kind of do that, Jordan, I want to just learn a little bit more of kind of your upbringing, where you grew up. So if you don't mind sharing with myself and the listeners, what was, just paint a little bit of a picture of your childhood. Where did you grow up? You kind of mentioned sports a little bit, but
yeah.
just touch on that childhood, because I'm a firm believer we are products today as adults of the adults that were in our lives as we were growing up, and who we are today is in large part of the younger years. So just kind of give us a little bit of the details, maybe up to high school. And then you already mentioned you did your first competition at 19. So once we get to the high school point, we'll kind of transition from there.
Yeah, sounds great. So I had a very different upbringing than most. So I've lived my whole life in Western North Carolina. I grew up in the mountains, literally in the woods on family land. So Asheville, North Carolina, a lot of people know about. I lived on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. My family's been here for generations, and I'm one of 5 kids. And my dad worked his butt off in construction, trying to make ends meet for a family of 5. And believe it or not, all 5 of us kids were homeschooled after I went to elementary school for 1st and 2nd grade. Then our parents pulled us out, and we were all homeschooled after that. So it was a lot for my home and my dad to work construction, making ends meet for a family of 7. So one of the things that shaped me, obviously, is my dad. He works so hard, always has worked so hard. He instilled discipline in me from a very early age. I attribute my discipline that I have and my hardworking nature to him always, and I always will, because he did whatever it took to make things happen for us. We didn't always have a lot, but I'm also glad that I didn't come from a lot, because I know how to work to get what I want. So yeah, we were homeschooled, and then about 7th or 8th grade, I started doing these privatized classes. They're basically for homeschool kids. These former private teachers would just do classes 1 day a week. And you would go and you would have your subjects either Tuesday or Wednesday with a class of anywhere between 10 and 30 kids. And they would schedule homework for you to do throughout the week, since you had 4 days during the week that you weren't in class. And then you would take tests in class. So it's a little different, and you have a lot of time for yourself. You actually, from an early age in high school, you have to learn to manage your time, because you don't have any busy work. You have to take care of your assignments on your own, and then show up to class a week later and have all your stuff. But what that allowed me to do was I worked from the age of 14. So by the time I was 15, I was working 25, 30 hours a week while playing basketball and in school, and just juggling everything, because my parents were making ends meet, but I also wanted to do what I wanted to do, and wanted to go hang out with friends, wanted to be able to go out and do stuff or whatever. As soon as I had my license, I was going around doing whatever I could, just having fun being a kid. But I also worked really hard. I've worked from an early age, and I've never stopped working. So which I'm glad I did, because I've never known a time where I can just let off the gas and not have to strive for something from a very early age. And that was instilled by my dad, for sure.
So I'm very curious in regards to kind of like the homeschooling aspect of your upbringing, because that is, I think we're starting to hear a little bit more about homeschooling. More people are kind of pulling their kids out of public schools just because of different things that are going on in our country. But what what was kind of the reasoning that your parents, you said you went to like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, then they started homeschooling you. If you don't mind getting into that, why did they start homeschooling you? And for you personally, Jordan, what was that experience like? Because I know as a public school kid myself, we would have some homeschool kids join us for sports and stuff. And I mean, just because like we didn't know them, right? And they weren't ever
Right.
kind of a part of the, the weight training and the off season stuff. And they just kind of showed up and they were always kind of the outcast and kind of weird. So
Right.
what was your experience like after, if you don't mind sharing the reasoning
Yeah.
behind your parents starting to homeschool you?
Well, I also believe strongly in parents being the ones to instill um, their disciplines, their beliefs, moral, their morals, their character. If you have good parents, then that's going to translate. Hopefully, if you pick up the good things, you'll have a good moral ground, good character. So we're a Christian family, and we are very strong in our faith. And so my mom just, she didn't like the trajectory of public school, and she also didn't like the influences that I had from a very early age. Some of the kids, she didn't want us into drugs when we get into high school. She didn't want us into partying or whatever. Now, I know that everybody's had their experience with a weird homeschooler, and that's a lot of times the parents that just don't want their kids to socialize at all. So it wasn't at all that for us. We all turned out normal. So, but it was a little different how we did it. So I guess it was a lot more at home until I got to middle school. But we were so social because around here, believe it or not, there's a ton of homeschoolers. So a lot of homeschool events. There's a lot of there's these homeschool classes that I talked about that we even did every Friday when I was younger. And so you all go and socialize with all the local homeschool families. Again, some of them are like cooped up in the house all day, kind of weird kids. But for the most part, it's a really normal thing around here. It's like having a private school community in a way. And I had a ton of awesome friends, people that, even though we don't have a lot in common, maybe, but I still talk to them regularly. Some of them are gone or in college or wherever. But it was a really great community and a really great experience. And then when I was in middle school, they actually started this basketball program for homeschoolers, and they had several different teams. They had an organization throughout the state where, a lot of these kids would have to drive a long ways for their specific team to practice or whatever, because there were only so many. But we did have some competitive teams. We were honestly one of the best around. We would have tournaments in Greensboro when we'd have our like regional or state tournaments or whatever. So it was actually a homeschool organization. And some of the kids that played with us were from private schools that didn't have teams or whatever. So I had a lot of socialization with that. And those were most of my friends, were either my friends from classes that were one day a week or my friends in basketball. And then the team I played for, the football team, was even a private team as well. So I would say I was probably very, very social. Especially for a homeschool kid, you couldn't keep me cooped up in the house. I was begging my mom to drive me places till I got my license. It was, let me go to the Y and play basketball. Let me go do this with my friends. But it was always something to do with athletics. And I've always been OCD about some set goal. So I'm 5'9¾". Back then in middle school, gosh, I was like 5'4". I've never been, until maybe 14, I grew a little taller, but then everybody passed me. So basketball wasn't really the best thing for me based on my genetics, but I was always hustling. Even from age 12, I was doing agility. 3 days a week, I'd go to this Acceleration Sports Institute and do agility training. And my dad just did whatever he could to make that happen because he knew I wanted to do it and be a better basketball player. So it was a lot different. I had a lot more time allotted to things like that to be able to play basketball. I'd show up to the Y and I'd be playing with the guys that are in college between their classes, because all my age kids are in school, having to be in class 5 days a week. So, and then again, working my job at a garden center all through high school. unloading trucks and whatever else until I got off work. And then once I started going to the gym, I was headed to the gym after my shift was over at the garden center. So it allowed me to do things I wanted to do. And then I guess we'll get into high school at some point, but I did start doing early college classes at local community colleges in high school. So it transitioned over. But for the most part, yeah, I was doing the homeschool thing and the local classes and everything like that.
Excellent. So if you want to touch on high school a little bit right now, that's cool. But I am kind of wondering or curious, Jordan, about, because obviously you're only 25, right?
Yep, 25.
Yeah,
I'll be 26 next month.
Oh man, you're
young in the sport.
What's that?
I'm young in the sport. I got a lot of time.
You're young in life, man. I'm 34, so I've got a few years on you. But what I'm getting at is, you can touch on high school a little bit, but in those younger years, because obviously you got into bodybuilding very young, and you're still very young, and I'm going to be pursuing that as a career. But what did you kind of want to be when you were younger, like, quote unquote, when you grew up, or what were you thinking about before being bit by the bodybuilding bug, so to speak?
Yeah, so I was very, very, very good at math. Like, I loved math. I enjoyed it, believe it or not. I always wanted to do something with that, as a career, or so I thought I did. But at the same time, the thought of a desk job just drove me nuts. And so I never nailed anything down. I was in early college doing calculus and doing these page-long equations, and I loved it. And then I took some accounting courses, and I never even opened my textbooks and aced the classes. So I was really good in school. I was always on the dean's list at the community college I was at. But at the same time, I hated school. I absolutely hated it, even though I was good at it. But again, it was one of those other things. I was so OCD. If I didn't make an A, I would beat myself up. Literally, if it dropped under a 90 or whatever the A was, dropped to a B, I would be so mad at myself. So I've always been that way. I've been a little too hard on myself. But I kept changing what I thought I wanted to do. Thought I wanted to be an engineer. Then I thought maybe accounting. Then I thought, well, what if I'm a personal trainer? What if I'm go for nutrition? That was when I started dipping my toes into training and bodybuilding. And I was like, gosh, if I could just make money doing this, if I could just somehow make this my life, to where something with this thing that I love so much, I could make it a career. That's all I wanted to do. But prior to that, prior to me finding bodybuilding, I was so confused. It was just kind of like, well, I guess I'm good at math, so I guess I have to do one of these things, even though I don't know if that's really what I want to do. And it was really more so kind of people suggesting, oh, so you're good at math, you're really good at math, you should be an engineer, or you're an accountant type brain, you should really do accounting, or you should be a financial advisor or whatever else. And I was like, okay, I guess if it makes money, but it was never like, this is really what I want to do for the rest of my life, until I found bodybuilding. Then it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if there's any point where I can make money doing this or have this be my lifestyle, my career. But man, if I could, that'd be my dream. I knew it right off the bat. So still working on that part.
Yep. Now, what I just, the reason why I love this podcast specifically, Behind the Muscle, is because, again, I think we kind of touched on this before I started recording, but we see Instagram, right? We see the highlights, we see, the muscle, we see, the stage and the glitz and the glamour. We don't see, behind the muscle. We don't see behind the curtain. So, what was it when you started really, getting into strength training and bodybuilding? What was it that kind of in your mind is like, man, like, I love this, and if there's a way that I can, make a living from it, I'm going to do it. Like, what do you think really pulled you in and is like, this is what I love?
I really think so. that first show I did, it was after I stepped on stage on that first show. So I did my prep all wrong because I didn't know what I was doing. I tried, I was looking at online articles on how to prep, how to do this, how to cut fat and maintain muscle. I was obsessive about trying to do this right. But of course, you make your mistakes when you don't know much. But I was hungry for it. So leading up to that show prep, I was obsessed with the gym. I hated rest days. It was really hard for me to not train 7 days a week. I can remember days where I just said, screw it. I know I'm not going to recover for this, but I'm going to be in here for 4 hours. I just don't want to leave. And I was hooked on training. And that's been what it's been for me since day one. I almost love the off-season training part more than actually competing in a show. Just because I love training, I love the gym so much. So that's what got me hooked in the first place. But then, anybody that's done a show prep knows how hard it is once you get really lean and get really tired and you're still pushing to lose more and more and more body fat. You get drained and you don't love the gym as much. I will say this last prep was different for me, but back then I can remember coming up to that show. I was like, man, I don't know that I want to come into the gym again for a long time after I'm done with this, but I don't ever give up on my commitments ever. If I commit something to myself or to someone else or say something verbally, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. And I'm OCD about it. And I won't stop until I'm done with the task as best as I can do it. That's also been instilled by my dad. But so I finished that show prep. And as soon as I got on stage, I just had chills. Like I knew I wasn't anything special yet. I knew, it's a genetic sport. Maybe I don't have the genetics, maybe I do. But all I know is once I got up there and I was competing against other guys, I don't care how small the show was, it was just like so awesome for me. And I caught the bug then for competing because I'm a very competitive person. I always have to compete in something. And so it was after that I realized, okay, this is something I really want to pursue. And as soon as I got food back in me, it was like a dying to go to the gym. That's all I wanted to do again. So after that show, I hired my first coach and started on that path of really chasing bodybuilding 110%. And it's not changed since then. I was 19, I'm 25 going on 26. So it's been almost 7 years since then, 6-7 years.
So how did your parents kind of react or respond? What were kind of their thoughts when you kind of dove fully into bodybuilding and like, hey, like this is what I want to do?
Well, they've always been supportive of me in everything 110%. They may not always understand the direction I'm going, but they do trust my judgment. They always have. They know I got a good head on my shoulders. They know I'm going to work to make something happen. But at first, it's, around here, bodybuilding isn't a popular thing at all. It's kind of an odd thing to do. It's weird to not go out and have a beer. It's weird to not eat. It's a foodie beer town around here. On top of the fact that a lot of it's mountain folk that have grown up here and for generations been here. It's just not a bodybuilding lifestyle place. So it was weird to them at first. They just didn't understand it. They're like, okay, my son's stepping up there in these trunks and whatever you want to call them. And we're going to be there though, because we want to support. So at first, and also the whole food thing, it's such a social thing. It's such a family thing. So anytime I'm missing out on food stuff with family, it's always hard. It's still hard, but they understand it more now. I will say there was one point though, specifically before my second show, where I was in school and I was struggling to stay awake in my classes. I was working, I was bodybuilding, trying to prep my meals, trying to make A's in classes. And I made a decision. I was like, you know what? I'm paying cash through school. I'm working my tail off to try to get a degree in something I don't really know what I want to do. and this just isn't working for me. Maybe I'll come back to school, but right now I really want to I just want to bodybuild, and I want to work to be a better bodybuilder. I'm going to invest in it, and I'm going to try to go at this thing 100%. And so I did stop going to school, and I tried just going head on with this, and I jumped right into a show prep in 2017. And of course, my parents were there. They supported it. They did kind of question, I'm sure, I don't remember as much. Plenty of people questioned why I wasn't going to continue with school. And that's generally a question your parents will have. But I do think it was the right decision to make. I think that these days people put too much pressure on going to school and getting a degree and spending the money. And my thought process has always been, okay, you're going to go into debt and take out a loan and get this degree that's maybe not specific to something you want to do. And is it going to pay off, or are you going to have a normal job just like everybody else that didn't go into debt to have a degree? So I've never wanted to be in debt. And I knew I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted this bodybuilding thing. And I wanted to enjoy my younger years and not have to rush through beating myself up trying to juggle so many things, because I moved out at, I guess I was 19, sometime around that first show, or maybe right after I moved out. And so I was on my own paying, rent, or going from this buddy's house to living with another buddy and paying rent with him or whatever. So it was just making ends meet. And I just couldn't keep the school thing in there at the time without having to take a loan out and going into debt, and I just didn't want to do it. So there were some family things that was like, okay, are you sure you want to invest this much into this? But at the same time, they've always been 100% supportive, and I love them for it. So
Awesome.
They've always believed in me anyways.
For sure. Now, before we kind of get into the contest history and get into kind of the training, nutrition, and then, the USA's just recently when you earned your pro card, I want to talk about, because you are young and you started bodybuilding young, and there's probably going to be quite a few young listeners that are going to listen to this episode, and people that are going to kind of from the younger generations that are going to be looking up to you because of your age. But I want you to just speak on, if you don't mind, for a couple minutes here, Jordan. Just how do you go about finding the right coach? This is something, as I've had a lot of different pro bodybuilders and top level amateur bodybuilders on both of my podcasts. It's something I'm always kind of wanting to kind of pick their brain on, because of social media, because of what we see with, the top level NPC athletes, the pro bodybuilders, all of them just about have coaches. And again, there's this glamorization of having a coach. And then you kind of have the old school guys that maybe are like, hey, just do it on your own.
Right.
Just touch on, how did you go from that first competition, doing it yourself? How did you go about finding your first coach? And then I believe you currently work with Chris Tuttle. So kind of talk about the transformation or the metamorphosis from going on prepping your own, getting your first coach, and then who your current coach is, and just what does that look like in terms of searching and finding the right coach?
Yeah. So sadly, a lot of it for me has been trial and error, and you can't always blame the coach, but sometimes it's just not a good fit. So my first coach was right out of that first show, maybe like 3 months later. I knew I needed somebody, because after that show, I was just so serious. I said, if it gets me 1% better, I'm going to do it. Like, if eating this or training this way or having this guidance or whatever. So I was so hungry coming out of that first show, and I signed up with a guy that actually, a friend of mine, he coached her, and she suggested him. And I looked at some of his bodybuilder clients, and they looked really good. He was massive. It still is. And that's always been what I've wanted. Even when I started out, I just wanted to get as big as possible, because I'd always been a skinny guy, and it seemed impossible to me. So I was like, I'm going to talk to the biggest guys. He was great to help me starting out, but it just wasn't a good fit. I think he expected me to compete maybe a little earlier than I wanted to. I don't know. It wasn't as involved as I wanted it to be. So we didn't really connect on that level. And it was kind of like a one-time payment for a whole off season, which I don't usually, coaches are a month-to-month thing. It makes more sense because I mean, you can't just indefinitely have a client on that paid a one-time thing. So after that, I actually started working with a local guy. He didn't charge me anything. He was just helping me out. So he helped guide me into my show, my first NPC show in 2017. And, I think that he really helped me learn a lot early on and things that I had no clue about. But I definitely, that first show didn't come in conditioned like I should have. I probably looked like 4 to 6 weeks out, if that, on stage. Like my legs just weren't there. My upper body would always come in really tight before my legs did. So I knew after that show probably should go with somebody else, but I hadn't picked anybody yet. So that first show in 2017, the prep went okay, but like I said, I wasn't ready yet. But then after the show, he told me, eat whatever you want, anything in sight, eat absolutely everything. I was like, that's probably not a good idea. Shouldn't I get back on diet or something? It's like, no, you got to grow right now. You got to grow out of the show. So I ended up with like edema in my ankles, swelling up with water because I took it seriously. I ate everything in sight. And like I said, I can put down a lot of food. Like if I had a day to do cheat food all day, 10,000, 15,000 calories is nothing, So, which I would never do. But I ended up in a bad spot. A friend of mine reached out to me and he said, hey, you need to get on asparagus and chicken and water and dandelion root right now, because I'm looking at your weight. You should not be up this much weight after a show. So he actually ended up being my prep coach for the next show. Though I had a coach in between, he was feeding me Pop-Tarts and bagels and jelly and all kinds of sugar and telling me to do 3 cheat meals a week. It just got fat with him. And then I started prep with that next coach that was helping me with my mishaps after my 2017 show. And I lost way too much weight going into that show. I think I went from like 255 and, not too fluffy, all the way down to 196 for light heavies. And that was my last show before my qualifier this year. So all that to say to the young guys, like, you may have a few coaches that just don't, and I'm not talking bad about my old coaches at all. They were awesome. I appreciate their help. But maybe we weren't in tune on some things. Maybe there were some things that I was missing that I should have communicated with them, but just did not have the results I wanted or needed. And then after him, I actually worked with Matt Jansen briefly. Now, I think Matt is great. The reason I went with him was his training principles, and I'm big on progressive overload, Dorian Yates style training, not a ton of volume, just like gun to your head kind of sets for lower sets, just working up to a couple working sets per exercise and making the most of those. I loved how he trained. I loved how his clients looked, but I felt that I was kind of maybe in my head, I wanted to be a national level competitor, and maybe he didn't see that yet. And I felt like I needed a little bit more involvement from a coach from that point too. And then I found Chris Tuttle. So all that to say, I went through 5 or 6 coaches before I found the right fit, and Chris has been the perfect fit. So I don't believe in coach hopping, but that was between 2016 and 2021. I went through, I think, 5 coaches. So 5 or 6 coaches. I see guys going through a coach every 2 months, and then they're like, oh, it's not working. It's been 8 weeks. I need a different coach. Oh, this isn't working. It's been 2 months. I need a different coach. Bodybuilding takes so much time. So be patient with your coach. If he does seem to be knowledgeable and seems like he cares about your progress, stick it out with him, give him the benefit of the doubt, And if you continue to see something you don't want to see, or he's really unresponsive, or he never updates anything that needs to be updated, or even the total opposite of the spectrum, he's giving you just fun workouts every single day to entertain you, those are bad signs as a coach. Whereas someone that's based on their knowledge of, okay, this is working for us, let's keep it here. This is not working, let's start slowly implementing this, changing it little bits at a time, changing certain variables one thing at a time. That's why I love Chris, because he's so meticulous, and everything he does is calculated. So just to the young guys, be patient with your coach, but at the same time, be aware of how much they care about you, because they should care about you and should want to build a coach-client relationship, which me and Chris now have. And it is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Chris has been the best thing to happen to me in bodybuilding, for sure.
What do you think? I had another NPC athlete on the podcast that has Chris Tuttle as their coach, and he just competed this last weekend, and he has said nothing but great things. He prays on Chris. What do you think? Is it just kind of like the personal connection that Chris has with you? What do you think, or what do you know is kind of that one thing that's like, man, you know what? Like this guy cares about me. This guy is a legit coach. Because again, there's a sea of coaches, and everybody's got different personalities and stuff. But like, what's that one thing, or that a couple things, Jordan, for you in regards to Chris, that makes him, in your eyes, an outstanding coach?
Well, there's so many things to go into about that, because for one thing, Chris and I have like a very, very similar mentality, very similar characteristics. We're both OCD about things. We're both extremely regimented. If he told, like this prep, a lot of coaches will give you a refeed meal after leg day. They're like, oh, you're really depleted. Go eat a burger and fries. Go get sushi. Go get this. I never got that. I started prep in January 2021 this year. Started with Chris back in January 2020. But the whole prep, it's just like, okay, we're a little flat. Add this many grams to your rice, this many grams to your oats, this many grams. It's never go get a sub. It's very regimented, no questions, no questionable variables added, to where it's like, okay, you haven't had a burger in 3 months, let's just throw a burger in and see what happens. It's no, you've had these same sources for food, we're going to keep to those same sources, and we're going to manipulate them. So that's his background in nutrition coming into play. And that's also, we have the same mindset of, I don't need something easy or entertaining, I want what works. I don't need a mental break to have a burger. As much as I want it, I don't need it. I want what works and what's going to make me even that 1% better. And believe it or not, Chris actually didn't have room for me when we started. And I had heard so many great things about him. And he's like, man, I'm sorry, I'm slammed. I cannot take you. I was like, I've just heard so many good things, and we seem like we work really well together. I work my tail off. Like, if you ever take me, you will have no issues or problems with my work ethic. I'm that client that does everything you say to a T and check every box. He's like, all right, you know what? Send me an email. We're going to talk about this. So after I talked to him about the kind of athlete I am, he ended up taking me. So, and it was the greatest thing that could have happened. But our training principles are the same. The way, it's funny because sometimes I would even be talking to my wife about my check-in, and I'd be like, I really think this might need to happen. And because I'd been working with him for so long, I'd started developing just a prediction of how he may see things. And a lot of the time it's like, I would probably do this, and he may surprise me sometimes, but a lot of times it would be what I thought my body needed. And he could just read and predict things like I've never seen anybody do. He knew my body inside and out by the time we got to the show, but that's also because we worked with each other from January 2020 in off season all the way to 2021. And he was ready to put me into it was a 26-week prep, half of a year. And we did it. I don't think we could have done it any better, but that's because he knew my my body prior. So that's another thing is, if you want to do well with the coach, you need to stick it out with them so that they know what to expect. Otherwise, you just jump into, hey, I'm going to grab this coach for prep, and they know nothing about you. A good coach will say, like Chris said, whenever I jumped on with them, okay, good, let's have several months of an off season at least before we jump into a prep, so I know your body and I know you. But aside from all that, man, he's such a genuine guy, and he really cares, and he really enjoys it. You can just tell he enjoys coaching, and that's something with me. I do my own online coaching too. I just really enjoy it. It's what I want to do. I love seeing people get excited about the gym or about bodybuilding if they're a competitor or whatever else. He had so much fun. We had so much fun talking back and forth during my peak week for USA's. He's just really genuinely cares. He's not just one of these guys grabbing a check. And that's the difference with him and the coaches that really do care about their clients. So
cool, man. I appreciate you touching on some of that in terms of the coaching. I know that'll be a huge help for anybody listening, Jordan. So your contest history is pretty short, which again, there's a lot of uniqueness within your story that we're going to continue to pull out. But so I just want you, if you don't mind, just you already talked about your first competition. You talked about 2017. I believe that was your first NPC show. So just touch on, I think maybe was there one or two shows in between that leading up to the USA's this year, but just touch on that. I want you to talk about the USA's this year. And then there's a few other things I want to talk about before we wrap up the conversation.
Yeah. So that was something that's been funny that a lot of people have brought up to me is that I never really thought too deeply into until after this show and the results. So it's kind of like, okay, wow, that is pretty crazy. I did one NPC show in 2017, one in 2018. Then I did an NPC qualifier 7 weeks ago now. And then I won the USA's. So that's 4 NPC shows total. But the thing is, what people don't see is that between 2018 and 2021, while other people may have been wasting time not being ready on stage, going through preps each year, taking 4 to 6 months out of their progress of what they could have been doing, adding muscle tissue to their frame, adding density. I was in the gym and I was consistently checking boxes, eating my 6-7 meals a day. I mean, maybe taking off of those 6-7 meals on Christmas or Thanksgiving, but I'm talking every other day through that was as if I'm a pro bodybuilder and I'm conducting myself that way. And I think that's lost in this day and age, because from 2018, I didn't plan on that far long of an off season. We were planning on like 16 months of just growing straight all the way through there, then start a prep. And of course, changing coaches a couple times prolonged that, but also COVID happened in 2020, and I didn't want to be in a show prep where my show may get canceled. But that was the year I was wanting to go to a national level show, because I qualified nationally in 2017. I qualified nationally in 2018. I mean, both year 2018, I won my class. 2017, I got second in my class. So I qualified both times. 2017 was my first NPC show. So I won the heavyweight novice, and then I won the overall novice. So I did well. But I knew I wasn't ready for a national level show. I think guys jump into these national shows too soon. And I also think guys like to trophy hunt at the local level. I also think with social media, people don't like having to be fluffy for 2 years straight because they lose their motivation. But I never lost my motivation. I never missed a workout. I never missed a leg day. I never missed my cardio sessions if I had them in the off season. So, and that's hard for a lot of people without a show in sight, but I knew what I had to do to eventually reach my goal of going pro, though I didn't see it happening as fast as I did, but I just didn't know what was underneath all that fluff. I mean, I've been in the off season for 2.5 years straight. You get pretty fluffy when you don't cut down in the meantime. But I just put in the time and put in the effort. And I did always say I wanted to get my pro card with as little NPC shows in the meantime as I don't need all these trophies leading up to the real thing, because the goal was to be an IFBB Pro. The goal wasn't to win some local show and get a trophy and, you know, have abs for Instagram in the meantime, you know. So I'm grateful that I'm that way and that I did that, because I know a lot of guys that kind of feel the need to have the attention of looking a certain way during the year. Where I was just on another podcast recently, and I told them, you know, people in my off season, I had several people say, well, you look like a power lifter, not a bodybuilder. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I've been in off season for almost 3 years. Like, that's just going to happen. But I had confidence in myself and I believed in myself. So I kept banging in the gym every day, and it paid off. But it is kind of funny because I don't think anyone saw me coming.
So touch on the USAs then. I mean, I just want to hear about kind of the whole experience, because it's definitely a big accomplishment. It's an awesome goal that you've accomplished and completed. And it's going to catapult you forward in your career of bodybuilding. So just touch on the entirety of the experience, kind of the feelings, the emotions, the ups, the downs. Just talk about that day, and then kind of that moment when you realize, like, hey, I'm officially an IFBB Pro now.
Yeah, so I actually have a story from the regional show that I just have been wanting to share with everybody, especially to young guys, because I think it's motivating. So the goal was USA's. The show in Charlotte 6 weeks prior, me and my coach just considered it a warm-up show. I only showed up at 90% conditioning because we knew we had to save it for USA's. So, I mean, for instance, at USA's, I was like 2 pounds under the weight cutoff, just barely had to deplete to get there, which the weight cutoff for heavyweights is 225. At this other show, I weighed in at 234, 235 after cutting water. So, I mean, I was holding a lot more intentionally. But I had the best shape. I was the biggest guy there. I was the only super heavy there. But there was a light heavyweight that supposedly beat me by 1 point. It was very debatable. I've never been blown up so much on Instagram and my DMs or at the show of people that were like, what just happened? We thought you swept the show. I'm not going to trash talk anybody. I'm not going to say anything negative. And I would never make that excuse, but I know what I bring. And, you know, obviously 6 weeks later won a pretty major title. So that being said, you know, I didn't hear my name called for the overall at this regional show. And that was, I thought I had it. I'm a humble person, but I thought I swept that show. So after that show, I was very defeated. And I was like, what am I even doing? I walked out of the venue with my wife, and I remember just having a moment where I stopped on the sidewalk with her and I gave her a hug, and I started to get emotional. And I was like, what am I doing talking about USA's? I don't even think if I can't beat this guy, I can't stand with those guys. There's no way. And I was like, what are we even talking about? It's a waste. That lasted for about 30 minutes. And then I saw the videos of me on stage and stuff and started getting pumped up. And I was like, okay, you know what? I do bring something to the sport. And maybe, you know, whatever just happened, this guy was a local guy. He was a judge. He was all this. And I was like, maybe I can just put this behind me. Those aren't the same judges I'm going to be in front of. I'm going to be in front of Steve Weinberger. I'm going to be in front of the best judges in the nation. And you don't have to be some local trophy hunter guy. You can show up and they're going to judge you accurately. So that drove me even harder, because I was like, if I wasn't undeniable enough that they could make that call here, I have to be undeniable here. But going into USA's, Chris didn't give me any prior expectations other than telling me I was going to be dangerous. He didn't want to blow up my head or tell me anything to give me expectations. And, you know, you see people on Instagram And some of them look better in pictures than they do in person. Some look massive. Some it's like, oh my gosh, how do I even stand next to that guy? So I just didn't know until I showed up. And from the get-go, guys recognized me. And I'm like, how do these people know who I am? Like, some of these bodybuilding pages reposted me and stuff, but these guys at the national level are impressed with me. This is cool because I went in prior thinking I've never done a national show. They've never seen me. I just want a top 5. I just want to first call outs. Even if I don't, I'm happy that I stood with the best, because everybody's got this talk about this heavyweight USA class being like one of the best heavyweight classes they've seen in a while, deep class. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going in with no expectations because I don't want to disappoint myself like I did 6 weeks ago. And it was really cool to have those guys that I really admire and respect to see me and say, hey man, you look great. I think you're going to be top 5, or whatever anybody else had to say. It meant a lot to me because I hadn't been around those level of competitors before, and I had so much respect for them and do. And so finally, after being there for days, Friday morning rolls around, it's prejudging, and I feel really confident, feel really good, but I still don't know what to expect. And then we run through our dry routines, run through all the guys. There's 23 guys in the heavyweight class. And then when they called my name or my number for first call outs, I was just blown away because that was my goal. And then they moved me center stage, and I'm like, is this really happening? Like, I'm literally center stage at USA's in the heavyweights. And just after prejudging, man, just because I put so much into this and put so much effort and so much time and consistency, it's my dream to do what I'm doing now. Just after prejudging, I walk off the stage and hug my wife and try not to tear up too much in front of everybody. It was so much emotion all weekend. And then, it's a 2-day show. So I had to wait from Friday early afternoon, or it may have been 11 in the morning, all the way to Saturday night to get to finals. And they even rejudged my class at finals because they brought up a guy from the second call outs. But then, I had so much fun posing and doing my posing routine and being up there in front of everybody and that big of a stage. And then, they line us up for the heavyweights to call us out. And from that point on, nothing has felt real for like the last week, man. It's such a blessing. And I've been so humbled because, we're sitting there. It feels like 10 minutes has gone by them calling people out because I'm just waiting and waiting for my number to hopefully get called first. And they finally call me for the heavyweight win, the class win, and the pro card. And there's Flex Wheeler handing me my pro card. And it's just a dream come true, man. That alone was a dream come true. Then step back out and have the overall comparisons. And then they call me for Mr. USA. Never thought I'd hear Bob Ciccarillo call my name for Mr. USA. It was just unbelievable. So many emotions, everything in that moment. When you finally reach a dream like that, it's like, oh my gosh, it's all worth it. All the sacrifice, all those days that were so hard, all the times I had to say no to friends that I wanted to be around, say no to food, say no to events, and just be on my grind day in and day out, where no one understood why I kept putting this much into it. Now I understand, and everybody understands, and I, along with everybody else, sees that it was so worth it. Just an absolutely incredible feeling, and I'm totally humbled by it and honored by that title.
Yeah, man, that's some special stuff, dude. When did you know, Jordan, kind of like, starting off in bodybuilding and stuff, and you kind of hear like, oh, bodybuilding is a sport or a competition of genetics, and you kind of got all these different people that think they know bodybuilding talking, right? When did you kind of know that, hey, I legit have some potential in this sport? Or have you just kind of always kept your head down and just said, you know what, this is what I want, and I'm going to go for it?
Well, I've definitely always told everybody the only limiting factor at all for me will be genetics. If there's a limiting factor, it has to be my genetics, because it will not be my consistency, my discipline, my work ethic. It won't be any of those things. But I never really knew, I guess, until now, to be quite honest with you. I never knew. I mean, 2018, I was very disappointed with how much weight I lost in the prep. And I was like, maybe I have a really hard time retaining muscle. But then looking back, I knew we just did the prep wrong. I can honestly tell you, I did not have the confidence in me to know that this was like something I could really, I always knew I would go far. I always knew I would eventually go pro. But I guess it took this show standing up next to the national level guys for me to say, okay, maybe my genetics don't suck. Maybe I have something there genetically, my shape, my balance. I may not be one of these mass monsters, and I've got to put the time in to gain the size. But I think I'm genetically structured in such a way that I really could do damage on the pro stage. And it took me until now to realize that, because again, I've been literally fluffy for 3 years and full on off season, just trying to grow. So it's so much drastic change that has happened over the last 6 months in my shape, because I didn't know if I'd blown my waist out by eating, 800 grams of carbs a day. I didn't know if maybe all the heavy lifting had pushed my gut out to where, some of these guys, as they grow, they don't quite have that tiny little waist anymore. And by the end of prep, I'm wearing a size small waist trainer, and it's kind of too big on me. I needed an extra small, and being the top of the heavyweights, that's pretty crazy proportions. So I think I realized that's my game. And genetically, that's something you kind of just have to have the genetics for that, to have that kind of X frame. And it really took me cutting down for this show to see that in myself. So I think I do have the genetics somewhat. I may not be a freak, and I may not be able to eat, breakfast cereal all through prep, post workout, like some of these guys. I wish I could. Can't eat pizza during prep, but I have to be extremely regimented. But I do think I have some genetics on my side, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to work as well. So
What's your mindset like, just day to day? Is there like kind of like a mantra, a word, kind of just something that you really focus on within your mind that just kind of keeps you going?
I mean, I always have a set goal in my head, I guess. So now, the past week, I cheated on Sunday after the show, had plenty of cheat food that afternoon. And then I had a meal with my wife Monday night. But aside from that, it had been diet all week. Perfect. And then, had a meal with my parents, my family, because I hadn't seen them, but then it's back on to perfect meals. And then it's just, I just can't get things out of my head when I have a goal. So right now it's pro debut. I'll have a set where I'm like grinding out some reps and I'm real close to failure. And in my head, I'm just like, I got to hit that pro debut. So right now, my mantra, I guess, is just pro debut. Whereas before it was pro card. You want to be an IFBB pro, you got to train like an IFBB pro. If you want to be an IFBB pro, you got to eat like one. And so for the longest time, I was saying I need to train, I need to eat, I need to live like an IFBB pro. And if I don't, I can't expect to ever be one. So I need to do what the guys at the Olympia level are doing right now, so that one day I can be like them. And so that's, again, to the guys starting out, don't expect the results from these guys that you look up to if you're not putting the effort that they are putting into it, because you'll never be there. You have to put that effort in as if you're already there, with the motivation that you're going to be there one day. You just have to put the time in and the effort in now. So anytime I've had a goal, that's what runs through my head over and over on repeat. And IFBB Pro has been on repeat in my head for the last 3 years straight.
So speaking to pro debut, is there any thoughts in your head, or have you had a conversation yet with Chris in terms of maybe when that's going to take place?
Yeah, we threw around the idea of Texas Pro, which this year's Texas Pro is next weekend, but Texas Pro 2022 would be a year from now. We want to gain, as much muscle as possible while keeping my waist tight. Improve my arms. Everybody knows arms is my weak point. It's no secret. They have improved, believe it or not, over this last prep. But if I can just keep my same kind of proportions, fill out my upper body, my back density a little more. I want my back double to be way more dense and my mid back to pop even more. But there's a lot of things that I could bring that these pros aren't bringing right now, like some of the shape and conditioning that I know I can bring. If I can add that much size and bring the shape and conditioning I already have, then I think I could compete in 2022. And my coach is moving out to Texas right now. So we threw around the thought of, hey, why don't we do Texas Pro next year? You can come hang with me and we'll get you ready for the show. And so that's like my motivation now. That's another thing running to my head. I'm like, Texas Pro 2022. And it's motivating because I like having a deadline. I like being able to challenge myself. If I'm not ready, I'm not going to do it because I don't show up to lose. My first pro show, I probably can't expect to just blow anybody out, obviously. So, first place at your first pro show, it's a little far-fetched, but I don't want to ever say anything's too far-fetched, but I don't want to show up thinking, well, I may get second call outs if I'm lucky. So it's a matter of when I'm ready. I'm used to competing when I'm ready, putting the time in before then. But I would say the goal is maybe Texas Pro 2022, just to have something in my head.
Excellent. All right. We're going to wrap things up here. But before we do, I do want to just touch on training and nutrition quickly. You've kind of already brought up progressive overload. So maybe, the majority of people that are going to be listening to this, they kind of already know what progressive overload is. So we don't need to kind of get into the nuts and bolts, but just answer for me, if you don't mind, Jordan, kind of why do you like that style? I know you mentioned Dorian Yates, and maybe that's kind of just, that's kind of the way he trained the HIIT style. So maybe that's where you adopted it, but why progressive overload? And then just share a little bit about the nutrition side of things. Cause I really love it when you talked about Chris's kind of philosophy or the way that he approached nutrition with you, where it's like, hey, if we're going to have a refeed or a cheat meal or something, it's like, we're not going to go out and have pizza and burgers. We're just going to increase, the foods that you've already been eating. So why progressive overload? And then kind of why or what does your nutrition just on the day-to-day look like, including maybe some of the main foods?
Yeah. So I just think progressive overload is tried and true. I think that if you're messing around with too many movements, just trying to entertain yourself, you're not going to grow as well as if you go and you incline bench and you've got 315 on this week and you keep your form perfect and you're 325 for the same reps next week, or you're 315 for 2 extra reps next week. You are gaining muscle as long as both those weeks you went to failure and both those weeks your form was the same, your tempo was the same. So progressive overload is the best way. I may not be tracking like my bicep curls or my tricep pushdowns or certain things, or like my side laterals, whatever, but those compound movements that are the best bang for your buck movements, if you're not tracking that you're progressing on those and you feel the need like this week I'm going to flat bench, this week I'm going to, incline dumbbell, this week I'm going to go do hammer machine, and this week it's not trackable and it's fun because you get entertained, but I'm not here to get entertained. I'm here to make progress. And that's what I tell a lot of my clients is like, look, I'm not going to give you a daily workout plan because it doesn't work. I'm not going to try to entertain you. I'm here for your results. I'm not here for your entertainment. So I think that you need to, I've done the same structured plan for training. I changed it up a little bit in prep because I had to pull back and not fatigue myself. But for off season, I didn't change my training for like a year and a half. It was basically the same basic movements. Sometimes I would change the order of some things, but it was like legs. Okay, we're getting on the hack squat, or I would alternate hack squat and Smith machine squats, but then I could track where I'm going up on hack squats and where I'm going up on Smith machine squats. And it's something that you can track week to week, and you're getting stronger. You're full blown off season. So it's not like prep where you can see little changes. You need to see those changes in your training. So if I know I'm getting stronger with the same form, with the same tempo on these movements, I know I'm putting muscle in that area. So that's why I believe in progressive overload, because it's tried and true and it doesn't lie. So.
And touch on just kind of the nutrition side of things, and maybe some of the main foods that you eat on the day to day.
So I pretty much eat the same exact foods I've eaten since January 2020. It's cream of rice, jasmine rice, and oats. That's most of, and then fruit. That's been like my carbs. Then I've had 2 chicken meals and a beef meal, all with pretty much jasmine rice. And then oats is in the morning with fruit, with egg whites and eggs. We would add almond butter or peanut butter as fats, depending for pre and post workout or breakfast, because pre and post workout, always cream of rice, always. It's cream of rice, almond butter, banana, and whey protein. And that's it. It's been the same 6 meals for different amounts for 2 years, or I guess it's been a little over a year and a half. We just added back in potatoes as an option, some English muffins now, some sourdough bread, because I'm in off season now. So I'm getting some more variety. But, ever since January 2020, we figured out what worked for my body, what was digestible, what I felt good on, and all the way into peak week, into the show. I mean, the only thing we may have changed was had a few more rice cakes because they're dry carb. But I mean, there's no need to change so many things. Figure out what your body likes, figure out what digests well, then don't change it. Just change the amounts. I don't need to be entertained with food. So Chris never dropped my carb, believe it or not, under 200 grams of carbs for prep. And some people think that's crazy. I mean, there's a point where we got my body my metabolism was just cranked. My fatigue was low. We were making sure I was getting 8,000 steps a day. So we made sure my movement during the day was the same. And we were doing anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes of cardio a day. Now, anybody who knows what it feels like to be depleted knows it doesn't matter how many carbs you eat or how much cardio you're doing. If you have roadmap veins in your glutes, like, you feel like trash. It's just the way it is. If you're peeled, you feel terrible. And you're still hungry, because in relation to if I'm eating 800 grams of carbs in the off season, 200 grams of carbs is nothing. It's a quarter of what I'm used to. But what we did was we had food really high of the same sources, the sources that we know my body digests well and works well on, then slowly taper. If I go too flat, maybe pull the carbs up a little bit, then taper it more. And always pay attention to fatigue. So if I was just beaten up, all right, let's pull back cardio for a couple of days, give you a little bump on carbs or fats, add a little bit more oil to your chicken meals, or add a little bit more almond butter or whatever. So it's just been manipulating the same foods. That's all it was. Very simple, but it works. And at that point, he knows what those foods are going to do to me and for me. And he can make those calls, and it just makes it much easier than these extra variables of go have a cheat meal, and then all of a sudden you're bloated, your digestion's off, and you got to take 2 days to fix it, So I love how meticulous he is, and I love being meticulous because that's how I operate.
So the last thing I want to kind of give you the opportunity to touch on is your wife. I know I listened to another interview that you did. She's been a big part of kind of the whole process. So I want to just kind of give you the floor to just talk about that relationship and how much she means to you and how much she really helped you in regards to 2021 and your competition season.
Yeah, she has been such an incredible help. ever since the first day I met her. She's believed in me. She always believes in me 100%. And that's what means more to me than anything. She believed in me more than I did most days. Days where I'd get down on myself and she'd pick me back up, and just helping me mentally more than anything to just keep going. I've had my hard days. Everybody knows how prep is. Like, your coworkers get the bad end of things, and your wife, whoever's around you the most, everybody knows how when you're hungry and you're struggling and you have prep brain, you're totally spacey, you forget things, you may have a day where you're in a bad mood, you're absolutely drained, you don't want to do much, you're OCD and you talk about bodybuilding nonstop, it's all you think about. But she handled it so well. And I owe her so much for that, because I've never had so much support in something in my life than I have with her. And I've told her, and I've told everybody, she deserves that title just as much as I do, because it's our title. And I know she'll continue to help me through this journey. And the thing is, we do the same thing. So, I mean, she eats 6 meals a day. She's not a competitor as in actively competing. I don't know if one day she might, but she lives out the lifestyle as if she does. So it's 6 meals a day. We eat the same source foods. I help her with her diet. She may do a few different things than me, but we're always meal prepping together. I may prep the rice and she may prep the chicken, or she prepped me my beef last night while I was busy at work. Like, we just help each other. We're a team, and it's the best team I could possibly imagine because of her. And we got married back in March, and she's just been the biggest blessing for sure. Cool. And I love her to death. And her Instagram is Brittany Hutchinson _ right? So if the ladies want to follow her, get some motivation, she's awesome.
Very cool, man. All right, Jordan. So we're going to kind of just wrap things up here. Before I kind of do the outro here and close it out, if there's any final words that you kind of want to share with the listeners, we had a very thorough conversation. But if there's anything that you want to share with the listeners in closing, please feel free. And then if anybody wants to reach out to you, follow along your bodybuilding journey, where can people reach out and find out more about you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very appreciative to be on this, man. Like I kind of touched on before, I just hope everybody can see my story and know that you can do absolutely anything you set your mind to. Just never give up. I know that's what everybody says, but after what happened with me at USA's, looking back, knowing there was a moment where I almost gave it up, something that ended up being the biggest dream of my life achieved so far. It's just, I want people to see that and maybe be inspired by that and know that they can push and make their dreams come true, regardless of the obstacles and how far-fetched it may seem. It kind of felt like a Rocky Balboa kind of thing for me, because people didn't know about me and I kind of came out of nowhere, and gosh, it's just been really cool. So I hope people can be inspired by that. You don't have to be anything special right off the bat. Just put in the work and you'll get there. And then my Instagram is IFBB _ Jordan Hutchinson. You can follow me there. I appreciate all the support from all my followers. And I've been getting, so much positivity lately, and it's awesome. I really appreciate it from everybody. And if anybody, I do offer my own online coaching as well. I'm a little busy right now with it. But if anyone's interested, you can DM me or email me at hutchinsonfit@gmail.com. But all that information is on my Instagram. So just reach out if you're interested in that.
So I just want to thank you very much, Jordan, for taking some time out of your schedule to come onto the podcast, chop it up with me, just kind of share behind the muscle in terms of your bodybuilding story. So thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on. I love how you do these podcasts and really want to know the backstory of bodybuilders. So I really appreciate you, man.
For sure. So listeners, thank you so much once again for listening to Behind the Muscle podcast. Your listening ears are greatly appreciated. As you guys found great value in Jordan's episode, I would just ask that you guys would take this episode and share it on your social media platforms. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can find Behind the Muscle podcast under the 127 Fit podcast. I've got 2 podcasts going, and I just put everything under 127 Fit. If you'd like to find out more about Behind the Muscle or 127 Fit, you can find all of that information, previous episodes, on Instagram at 127 Fit. And finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. I'll catch you guys later.